always had our back. She always put us on the map. She nurtured us from a babe. So first teacher, look at that. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling good. Go and get your bread up. Why you feeling down? Go ahead and put your head up. Why you fed up? Why you stressed out? Yeah, I know you really messed up, but go and look around. Why you pressed up? Know you blessed up. Go ahead and fill your cup up with some lemonade. Cause when life gives you lemon, you block it like Russell Simmons. And just know that your life made with a clear shade. Cause I'm feeling good, feeling good, good. I'm feeling good, feeling good, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good, feeling good. I'm feeling good, feeling good, feeling good, feeling good, feeling good, feeling good. What's good, black people? First and foremost, if you're a first time viewer of my content of this video, like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel. So today is going to be a very short video, but also going to be very descriptive. Today we're going to be talking about Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And I've been meaning to do a video on this for months now, because every time that I run into a particular Hebrew Israelite, or dealing with these cult camps, these cults and stuff, they always want to deal with, do you come from Shem or do you come from Ham? Because they're going by the Eurocentric narrative that Shem is quote unquote Negroid Asiatic. Ham is he's a projector of the quote unquote dark races, which will concern the stereotypical Sub-Saharan African, and then Japheth being Caucasian. And mind you, these narratives were created by Europeans, because the Catholics were the ones who controlled the world. They controlled the science, they controlled the media, they controlled everything that the world perceived and still perceives to this day. Okay, so when dealing with Shem, Ham, and Japheth, we have to also understand, and I want to establish some things before I go further, is that the Bible is a mystical book. It's a book of riddles, it's a book of dark sayings, it's a book of allegories. The book is not a historical book. The book is not a book that you study so that you can find out what's to come. It's a book that's talking about your body, your consciousness, astrology. It's talking about everything concerning chemistry, alchemy. All that is in the quote-unquote holy book. Okay? Well, we're going to get to that in a second, right? So when dealing with Shem, Ham, and Japheth, let's also understand that if you have particular nations out here who proclaim to be Semitic or Hamitic, these are nations that have been Eurocentrically colonized, if that's even a word I can use. But these colonies, these countries who claim to be of Shem or of Ham, and also realize that they are speaking in a English language. You know what I'm saying? They're speaking in a English tone. We have to understand that these people have been colonized to believe these things. We have to understand that Shem, Ham, and Japheth are not historical characters in history. They are mythological characters. They are symbols. They are symbolic characters in a mystical book. Okay? For an example, when we're dealing with nations of people in the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah, Babylon, the Canaanites, Assyria, Egypt, these weren't actual names for the nations, right? I'd rather us take these particular names and use the symbology behind these names than to actually perceive these particular cities and nations historically from a astrological allegorical book. That's like trying to take history from a Spider-Man comic book. Okay, and that's not to discredit the Bible, because the Bible is a mystical book. It's a book with hidden knowledge. That's what mystical means. It's a book of mysteries. It even tells you in the Bible that it's a book of mysteries and dark sayings, right? So Babylon was never called Babylon. Egypt was never called Egypt. Assyria was never called Assyria. Babylon original name was Kadimra, and that means the gate of gods. or the gate of the gods. Egypt original name was Kemet. Assyria original name was Asher. And these are just, mere examples. These are just a few examples of these particular nations that are quote unquote proclaimed to be in the mystical book, the quote unquote Holy Bible. So the reason why you have symbology in a Bible, the reason why you have coding in a Bible is because it's a Masonic book. King James was a Freemason. The book was published, the King James edition was published in 1611. And this is the year of the 46th birthday of Shakespeare. Now, Shakespeare had a lot to do with the Bible because the Bible is written in his style, in his sonnet. Okay, if you ever study, literature, and you study Shakespeare, you realize that there's a particular way in which Shakespeare writes his work, his art. And so Shakespeare was such an influence to the world, to the Western society, that they made a style out of his form of writing, right? So they have something called Shakespearean sonnet, and you see this a lot in the book of Psalms. So the Bible English KJV edition was written in Shakespeare's format, his style, and his language. Okay, and in the sonnet, right, Shakespearean sonnet, the whole theme of poetry became the main tradition for mystical knowledge. They hid knowledge and information through poetry and riddles, right? This is what you have concerning Proverbs. Proverbs are just it's just mystical poetry. So, for an example, when you have the book of Psalms, let's understand that the book of Psalms is the book of lamps. If you just play with the words with Psalm, you have lamps. And the book of Psalms is a book of spells. If you don't believe me, just look it up, because there are witches and sorcerers who use the book of Psalms for their spells. Let's also make known that the Bible is written in a Masonic manner. There are 66 books in the Bible. There are 4 Gospels in the New Testament. This is also represented with the 4 bases that make up your DNA strand. Also dealing with the 4 corners of the earth, 4 seasons, the 4 sons of Heru, so on and so forth. And you could do your research on this, but Psalms 46 is dedicated to Shakespeare because the year 1611 was the 46th birthday of Shakespeare, and the 46th word in the chapter 46 of Psalms, it says spear. It says in the book of Psalms chapter 46, it has the word spear to be the 46th word in chapter 46 of Psalms. So this just indicates, even Shakespeare, if you didn't know, he was a Freemason as well. So the Bible is written in a Masonic manner. It's written in mysticism. And so what the Catholics have done is that they have created denominations and concepts and philosophies to deceive and confuse the masses of people from the hidden knowledge that is within the particular book that we proclaim to be the quote-unquote Word of God. So when dealing with a mystical book, if something is written in hidden symbology and coding, it's going to be written in a script, right? This is why you call the Bible, when dealing with passages, you call them scriptures. Okay, it's just a set or a sequence or a series of scripts. And they're called scripts for a reason. They're not called scripts in terms of a historical context, but they're called scripts in terms of folk tales. And see, people have a very immature mindset, because when you tell people this, they will immediately think that because the Bible is written in an allegorical manner that is not meant to be taken literally in terms of a historical context, that means there's no relevancy to the Bible. And that's not true at all. That is not true at all. Just because a particular story or an analogy is brought out or written down for you to understand something that is higher than what you perceive right now, that has nothing to do with the relevancy of it. Just because something didn't historically happen doesn't mean that it's irrelevant. And see, that's a very immature mindset. So let's understand that nothing has to take place literally in order for you to have divinity. Nothing has to take place historically in order for there to be some form of relevancy in a particular book or anything concerning yourself. Okay, so there was no Shem or Ham or Japheth or Noah or Moses or Abraham or Jesus or Ezekiel or Jeremiah. These weren't historical characters. The reason why I could say that is because when you study the context in the literature of the Bible, it's written figuratively. It's written in a manner that is meant to be interpreted. When you study and look back at these scripts, because that's what they are scripts, they are stories. When you study and look back at these scripts, you will understand that it's written in a figurative manner. It's written in a rhythm. It's written in symbology. I mean, you're talking about people like Elijah being brought up in a whirlwind to heaven on a chariot of fire. You're talking about a talking snake, a talking donkey, a man walking on water, a man spreading the seas of the water, a man building an ark and then putting every single form of animal on the ark, and then being on that same boat for 40 days. A man being swallowed up by a fish for 3 days, a man dying on the cross for the sins of the world. You're dealing with symbology here. It's all symbology, but the Catholic Church pushed the concept that this was meant to be taken literally, so that you wouldn't grasp the hidden knowledge and understanding behind a particular book. That's what they did, because there are hidden principles in the book that's talking about your divinity, the anatomy of your body, the alchemy of your divine essence. But you don't want to take that in because you've been perceiving everything through the lenses and peripheral of Christianity. Whether you want to call yourself an Israelite or a Jew or a Baptist, whatever the case may be. But getting back on topic, like I said before, Shem, Ham, and Japheth aren't historical characters. These are mythological characters. Something that we need to understand is that when dealing with the perceptions of Semitic, Hamitic, or Hamitic, Japhetic, you're dealing with perceptions and terminologies that were created by Europeans, because the Catholics controlled the world. They controlled the perceptions that the world perceives in terms of life, in terms of science, in terms of history, right? So whenever they broke up the territories of the world, they did it by the quote-unquote Noah story. They chose the Noah story to perceive everybody in this world through the three descendants of Noah. So Shem was Asiatic or Mongoloid, Ham was Negroid, right? And then Japheth was Caucasian. And this is what the Catholics decreed for the world to go by. That's why you have white, black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever the case is. It all goes back to the Noah story. Does that mean that the Noah story actually happened? No, that does not mean that it actually happened. It means that the Catholics were controlling the mindset and the peripheral lenses of the people and told them to perceive the world in this manner. And that's what they did. So they used Shem, Ham, and Japheth to describe the three primary races of the world, when Shem, Ham, and Japheth never existed, for one, and two, the scriptures aren't meant to be interpreted in this form of manner. You have to understand, originally the scripture was written in a mystical form for people to interpret knowledge. It never talked about race. It never talked about particular nations of people per se. But these are this is the perception that Europeans grasped when they read this, because they have a poor, just off the back, they have a poor form of understanding our information, right? And the only reason why you have people in the higher ranks or the elites who understand the hidden knowledge in this book is because people, around the particular time that the Bible was made, they told them the hidden knowledge. And so when dealing with Genesis chapter 10, because that basically is the chapter where it talks about all the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, when you study these quote-unquote descendants, they're just formulas just talking about consciousness. But you're taking it literally, and you will actually think that these are talking about particular people. Now, the only reason why you will go back in history and you will find the particular names that you see in the Bible is because the people who were narrating and interpreting the particular nations of the world was the Catholics, were the Greeks, right? So they interpreted everything that they perceived through the quote-unquote Bible, because they took the Bible literally. So now we perceive everything in terms of the world through the lenses of Catholics. It's kind of like with the Native Americans, like Christopher Columbus was calling the quote-unquote Native Americans Indians when they were never Indians to begin with, right? They were indigenous people on their land. They never referred to themselves as Indians. So the Europeans interpreted the world through their perception. So they told us to call this particular nation Babylon, and this particular nation Egypt, and this particular nation Assyria. They told us to like this nation and to hate the other nation, and this is how they perceived the world. And so we're pushing Eurocentric ideologies without understanding that the very book that they are getting these concepts is not meant to be taken in a literal format. It is written in a figurative format. It is written in a way for you to interpret things. It is written in a way for you to understand something, to get a bigger picture of something that isn't written. It's not going to be direct. It's not going to tell you plain and simple of what form of information that they are talking about in the lesson behind that. Getting back to Shem, Ham, and Japheth, I want to establish this and conclude with this form of information, and this is all facts, but the very terminologies, like I said before, this is how they define the different races in this world. And this came from a particular school in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, and the school was founded by King George II. And remember, like I told you before, how the Catholics, especially the Jews, the Catholics and the Jews even today, they control the narrative and the perception that we see the world today. You know, even the news forecasters and everything, the banks, most of the banks and most of the news forecasters that we listen to, the media, is controlled by the Jews. The person who created Facebook is a Jew. You know, the people who control Twitter and Instagram, so on and so forth. We can deal with that another time. But when concerning the perceptions of races, when concerning Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the very terminologies of Semitic, Hamitic, and Japhetic, these were created by Europeans. And I'm showing you the evidence right here. I'm showing you the facts, the very terminologies in terms of how they established race. These were created by Caucasians. These were created by Europeans. So whenever you want to say, I'm of Shem or I'm of Ham, you know, for one, these are not historical characters or historical nations of people, you know, and you're going by a Eurocentric narrative of how you perceive the world. But that's all the time that I have for today. Until next time, I'm Tyrone. Thank you for watching this video and listening to what I have to say. Comment below about how you feel about what I say. If you like what I say, if you didn't like what I say, let it be known in the comment section below. Check out my clothing line business. The link that will be in the description box below. And if you want to follow my Instagram, that is below as well. Until next time, I'm Tyrone, and I am out.